The office of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has disclosed that the recent Trump administration announcement on the composition of a Gaza executive board was not coordinated with Israeli government and ran counter to their policy. It further revealed that Foreign Minister Gideon Saar would raise the issue with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Pakistan confirmed that it had received an invitation to join the board, a move that would bring another country with no diplomatic relations with Israel into the largely symbolic body. Pakistan's foreign ministry said it would remain engaged with international efforts for peace in Gaza, framing its position around Palestinian self-determination and UN resolutions. Pakistan has repeatedly accused Israel of genocide, a charge Israel strongly rejects. Israel's political and security leadership moved quickly to respond to the makeup of the more powerful Gaza Executive Board, which will oversee post-war governance in Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened meetings on Sunday with the War Cabinet, the Full Cabinet, and coalition party heads. According to Israeli media, Israeli officials said the issue is not the existence of a Palestinian civil administration in Gaza, but the inclusion of Turkey and Qatar on the executive board. Ministers agreed to oppose any Turkish or Qatari role in bodies managing Gaza, citing their political and ideological ties with Hamas. Officials stressed that Turkey is not viewed in Jerusalem as a neutral or legitimate actor. Several ministers reportedly blamed Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, for shaping the board's structure, alleging his regional ties influenced the decision. The Prime Minister's office said Foreign Minister Gideon Saar was instructed to address the issue directly with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio as a way to manage the dispute without escalating tensions between Netanyahu and Trump. Meanwhile, governments across Europe and the Middle East are reacting cautiously. Reuters reported that while invitations were sent to roughly 60 countries, only Hungary has so far given an unequivocal acceptance. Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, and Canada confirmed receiving invitations and said they are reviewing the terms, including financial commitments.
This is a board like no other. It will have the heads of major countries.
Some analysts warn the structure could marginalize Palestinian decision-making.
The board itself, the structure that's been put in place, this two-tiered board of exclusively foreigners with no Palestinians involved.
Meanwhile, a Middle East expert, Avi Malamed, has reacted to the composition of the Gaza Board of Peace, which President Trump put together, especially the involvement of certain countries like Qatar and Turkey. The first question to Malamed is on why Israel has drawn a very hardline position against some countries being part of the Trump's peace initiative.
The answer is very simple. Both Turkey and Qatar are major supporters of Hamas. Ideologically, politically, operatively. When I'm saying operatively, I mean the fact that both Turkey and Qatar are hosting Hamas senior leadership, including militants of Hamas that are engaged in terror actions. And so hence you can understand why Israel is very unhappy, let's put it this way, with that.
Now, Pakistan has now confirmed it received an invitation as well, despite having no ties with Israel and openly accusing it of genocide. How does that affect Israel's trust in this process?
Well, the issue is not about trust. In the end of the day, Israel finds itself in a place where, to a large extent, it has to comply with the U.S. President Donald Trump. He's moving ahead with this program. Apparently, very clearly, he's taking into certain extent Israeli consideration, but mostly not taking Israeli consideration. He's determined to move forward. He declared the beginning of the second phase, and Israel basically has to face effects on the ground, as we see that in the case of Turkey and Qatar.
And what are your thoughts about Vladimir Putin being invited?
I don't know to refer to that. It seems to be something to be more connected to the whole triangle of US, Putin, Ukraine issue. I'm not so sure that this is something that is for real, or is there something that is more kind of like on a PR level, to put it this way. At this point, it's very difficult for me to say how, practically speaking, Putin is going to be part of that council that President Trump announced its formation.
and Netanyahu is choosing to address his concerns quietly with Washington via Secretary Rubio rather than publicly confronting President Trump. Is that restraint strategic, do you think, or is there a rift starting to develop here?
Well, if I'm trying to look from Netanyahu's perspective, particularly from a political perspective, I think that Netanyahu identified that development as a negative one for him, particularly again in the political context, because it's very clear that if Qatar and Turkey are going to become the major patrons, sort of speaking, of the reality in Gaza post the war, this is definitely not something that Netanyahu could market as what he was constantly marketing, the ultimate triumph. It's far from that. You could see that already even within the right-wing ranks, there is a growing discontent and criticism on Netanyahu. So from Netanyahu's perspective, I think that first and foremost, his resentment, to put it this way, is first and foremost, I would say, fueled by his political calculation. Remember that we are in a year of an elections. Netanyahu was playing the card of the ultimate triumph. As of now, it seems like Israelis definitely cannot mark the ultimate triumph that Netanyahu was constantly marketing to the Israeli public.
Okay, so bottom line, what would need to change for Israel to see this initiative as a stabilizing force in Gaza rather than a strategic risk?
The big story in the end of the day is this whole story of the demilitarization of Hamas. Potentially or theoretically, all the sides are basically complying with United Nations Security Council 2803 that basically calls specifically and clearly for the disarmament of Hamas. Hamas is saying, I'm not going to disarm it myself, and it's very obvious that nobody else is going to disarm Hamas. One cannot, of course, expect that neither Turkey or Qatar, of course, are going to disarm Hamas. And so you got a situation on the ground that, practically speaking, we are going to more or less square one, because Israel could continue and will probably continue and argue that as long as Hamas is not demilitarized, based, again, the international community formal decision, Israel is not going to withdraw from Gaza Strip. Israel is not going to play ball, sort of speaking, with the factors that are supposed to stabilize the situation in Gaza Strip. So all in all, when we look at this situation on the ground, I think that it's going back to square one, particularly in the sense that in the end of the day, President Trump is subscribing the pace of events, the nature of the development of the events. I would even say to a certain extent, subscribing reality to some sort of like an inner agenda of President Trump, and all other players has to basically comply with that inner agenda.